What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to the show. As always, thank you for tuning in. So, I found something pretty interesting during the GOP debate. You know, the one thing with that separates conservatives and leftist Democrats is we think ahead. You know, we ask ourselves the question, and then what? We act on intuition, wisdom. That is one major thing that separates conservatives from leftist Democrats is wisdom. Definitely. Wisdom does not exist on the left. You know, there was an old saying, what do you call a leftist Democrat that grows wise? A conservative. I think it's something like that. I probably butchered it, but it's something along those lines, but it's true. And so it was something Vivek said during the debates, and it actually caught my attention. It didn't catch my attention. I always knew that this was the goal, but it has something to do with the government capturing private lands using eminent domain. This is a big problem that I think the Supreme Court needs to rule on. I think we need to get rid of eminent domains. It is just too big. You know, it didn't used to be a problem because you didn't have a government that was rogue and out of control and the largest employer in the country. You know, the government was still binding to the Constitution and loved this country and wasn't being run by the elite corporatists and globalists. But now it's totally different. I think the Supreme Court definitely needs to have another look at eminent domain. Anyway, so I got an article here, hat tip to Jack Davis at the Western Journal. It's Ramaswamy sheds light on the climate cult's plot to steal land from Americans. So one of the major funding ideas behind the creation of the United States is being threatened right now in Iowa, according to Republican presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. John Locke, the Enlightenment thinker, whose writings were mined in the production of the Declaration of Independence, believed that the fundamental natural rights of man were life, liberty, and property. The last is now in danger, as Iowa farmers could be forced to sell their property so that carbon capture pipelines can crisscross the Midwest, Ramaswamy said in a video posted to X. And here is that video right here with Vivek speaking with Alex Jones on X. Yes, that's right. Alex Jones is back on Twitter. And I think that was amazing, something I was going to do a story on. But since we're talking about this, now you know. Elon Musk did a poll, a public poll. Should he allow Alex Jones back on Twitter or back on X? And 71% of people agreed, which is awesome. If you're going to be somebody that is a free speech absolutist, then you need to let everybody speak. It's kind of the point. So Elon Musk did another good thing, man. I'm really liking this guy. So far, so good. But another thing as conservatives is we're really weary to put too much trust in people because we're constantly let down. So look, I like Elon. I think he's doing a great job. He's doing good for humanity, good for this country, good for free speech. I honestly can't think of one single person that has done more for the betterment of humanity than Elon Musk. I don't know. I would really have to think about it, but off the top of my head, I can't really think of it. Certainly not in modern day anyways. So back to the story here. So Vivek was doing an interview with Alex Jones, and this is what he had to say right here. Check this out.
Give us 2 minutes on the climate cult. Extra info on what you said last night.
Climate cult.
Yeah, and that was supposed to be a general closing statement, but I was so disappointed they didn't ask about the climate cult once that I just said, forget my closing statement. I want to talk about this. The climate cult has nothing to do with the climate. That's why one of the many reasons why it is a hoax.
Bingo.
The real answer is this has to do with letting China catch up to the United States using multilateral institutions to impose these emissions caps on the U.S. and a lot of people making money as middlemen along the way.
Yep. I'm
talking to you. I happen to be talking to you from northern Iowa, a rural area where I am right now. We flew up here after the debate. Right here, Alex, they're building a carbon capture pipeline across farmland in this state. I've met innocent farmers who don't want that pipeline built across their land. There are real dangers and risks associated with it. One of those in Mississippi had a leak and exploded, and that actually sent a bunch of people to the hospital. They're capturing carbon dioxide from ethanol plants and building a pipeline across. You know what they're now threatening to use with those farmers is eminent domain. So think about that unconstitutional violation, that World Economic Forum vision that you have no property. Well, now they're bringing that to the backyards of even Iowa farmers in the United States, where they are saying, hey, we're going to use eminent domain by hell or high water if it's your property or not. And I just think that's wrong. It's unconstitutional. The only legal justification for eminent domain is if they say it is necessary for a public use. But then if you accept that fighting carbon dioxide emissions is necessary, that meets the constitutional standard for what's required for eminent domain and seizing your property, then next you know what's coming. Come and take your gas stove. Leave a $50 check in your mailbox.
Oh, listen, they're already doing it. It's a total power grab by elite corporations against the people.
Yep, that's right. Everything about that piece of audio is right. When Vivek was talking about if you essentially justify the government being able to steal your property for climate change, oh, buddy, then they are going to take that inch and they are going to turn it into a mile. And they'll use this case as precedent. What they'll do is be like, well, I mean, you took the land from the homeowners in Iowa to put that pipeline. Why can't you let us take this land right here from this person to put a solar farm? That is what's going to happen. And so again, like I said in the beginning, conservatives always ask the question, and then what? We think ahead. And that's exactly what Vivek's talking about. If you allow this to happen, if you allow a pipeline, essentially the government stealing these people's property to put this pipeline through, then they're going to use that to justify their other, quote unquote, necessary land grabs for the betterment of humanity. This is the mindset of the Democrat leftists, of the collectivists, is they don't believe in private property. You know, just like the World Economic Forum, another thing Vivek talks about, he's really good at bringing up certain points and almost a little too good. I think that's why a lot of people don't trust him. He almost always says the perfect things, the right things at the right time. It's almost like he's too good, man. It's something about him. I don't know what it is yet, but it's just the trust just isn't all the way there with Vivek. Anyways, I digress. What he's talking about, if you justify that and you allow the pipeline to go through, they'll use that as precedent down the road to do whatever else they want to do. So essentially stealing people's property for a solar farm or a wind farm or whatever. And so this is a big deal going on in Iowa that I don't think a lot of people are talking about. And I'm glad Vivek actually brought it up during the debate. But of course, nobody was interested. And so nodding the use of eminent domain to take land for the project from those who do not wish to sell, he said, think of the unconstitutional violation that the World Economic Forum vision that you have no property. Well, now they're bringing that to the backyards of even Iowa farmers in the United States. That was a quote from Vivek. And so Ramaswamy opposes eminent domain for private companies and has criticized other GOP presidential candidates for not taking a stand on the issue, according to the Iowa Capitol Dispatch. He says, why am I the only candidate who's able to even say these things to you? Ramaswamy said, it's because every politician dances to the tune of their biggest donor like a fact of nature. That's true. All these candidates on that stage are bought by special interests and elite globalists. Really, it's these people, the donors, that have billions of dollars. They spend all their money on these candidates because they don't trust the people to elect the right ones. They are so used to having control over everything that they think they can actually have control over democracy and, well, over our elections and who runs our country and our president and everything else. This is why all of our politicians are owned by the big donors and special interests on K Street. Well, that used to be the way, and that's what's changing now, only because of independent media. People like Alex Jones, people like Tim Pool and Dan Bongino and Steve Bannon over at the War Room, and shows like this. Independent media outlets are changing all this, and they can't stand it. And this is where I think censorship is coming into play. We're seeing a lot more censorship because it is the globalist elites. It is the World Economic Forum. They see free speech as a threat. They see these platforms, these independent media platforms, as a threat, these podcasts as a threat. They are so used to having just a full chokehold on information so that they can bend it and dispatch the information however they want, whenever they want. They're not used to having pushback like this. And this is why I always say that this election is not Republicans versus Democrats. Rather, the machine versus the people. This is the first time in my lifetime we've actually had a chance at getting our country back. So when you hear me say all the time, it's time to take our country back, we've never really owned our country. Not for a long time, not in our generation anyways. Those days are long gone where the government actually worked for the people. The people had oversight of what the government was doing. The donors and the billionaires and the globalists have had control of our government for a long time. That's why this place is a shit show. That's why we're $33 trillion in debt. These decisions aren't being made on the betterment of people and the betterment of the citizens, but on the betterment of the globalists. The ideas of the people and what the government is actually doing, the agenda of the government, there's no overlap there. They are not doing really anything for us. And so by giving the justification to the government that, yes, you could just take people's land to run a gas pipeline through or a pipeline in general or anything, is just going to get worse and worse in the future. And yes, hats off to Vivek for actually mentioning that. It's actually a big deal. And Iowa is the key. Iowa is the canary in the coal mine. So everyone, we're going to pay a lot of attention to Iowa in the coming weeks and months to see what happens with this situation, because it's going to be a big deal. So the pipelines take carbon dioxide, such as that produced at ethanol plants, and trap it underground. Ramaswamy said there's a domino effect if eminent domain is used to fight climate change. Ethanol plants are not the only things that emit carbon dioxide into the air. Kathy Stockdale, a corn and soybean farmer whose land has been identified for a possible pipeline, said she worries about what might go wrong. If there was a leak on our farm, we will be dead. We are in the kill zone, she said. It has happened before. In February 2020, heavy rain resulted in a pipeline rupture near Satardia, Mississippi. A CO2 plume made up 31,405 barrels of highly compressed liquid carbon dioxide settled over the town, sending 45 people to the hospital and forcing 200 others to evacuate, according to Inside Climate News. Carbon capture projects, which include pipelines, such as the one being fought in Iowa, have already been funded with $1.8 billion in U.S. taxpayer money. More than $12 billion in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act is designed to build more projects. The projects do not always deliver what they promise, according to a 2022 report from the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis. The report said 10 of 13 flagship carbon capture projects between 1986 and 2019 either underperformed or were abject failures. All right, that's true, but there is a catch to this. Now, as conservatives, as people that we're big on energy and we want to make sure energy is abundant and we want to make sure energy is clean and efficient and, most of all, cheap, we have to support pipelines. And so we got to be really careful with this one because this is a slippery slope. We either want pipelines or we want energy to be transferred by truck and train. It's one or the other. Now, conservatives always argue that pipelines are better than truck and rail, which they are. They're better for the environment. They're better for the economy. It's faster. It's more efficient. And so we are mostly pro-pipeline people. We were very upset about the Keystone XL pipeline being banned by Joe Biden his first week in office. And so this is kind of a slippery slope. We got to be careful not to try and play both sides of this and kind of look like hypocrites. And so you got to be real careful, but I totally see where he's coming from. It's one thing to have a oil pipeline to transfer oil, for efficiency and for affordability. But it's another thing to have a pipeline that doesn't really need to be there. A carbon capture pipeline that could rupture and explode and kill people, that's completely different. Yes, there are risks to pipelines, but at the same time, we need pipelines. We are the pro-pipeline party. So this one's going to be a real tricky one, but that's not even the biggest concern. The biggest concern is eminent domain, the government stealing property for the public good. You'll notice that the collectivists are all about the public good. We've seen this during the COVID crisis. We've seen this during the pandemic, where they were forcing everybody to get vaccines for the public good. This is a key attribute for the collectivists and the socialists, is everything is for the public good. So you produce goods for the public. You drive this car that's better for the public. Everything is for the public. It is like I said, it is It is key to socialism. It's not about individual rights, but the better of the community, the greater good. You'll hear all these words from socialists. And so you have to be, this is a common mindset from the collectivists, from the socialists. We have to have this pipeline in here, and we have to steal your land because it's for the greater good. We have to force a needle into your arm and give you a vaccine because it's for the greater good. I've seen this argued up and down by some of the smartest people in the world. One of those being Neil deGrasse Tyson, who sat on a podcast. I think it was Pete Bet Davidson's podcast, and he said it. Bet Davidson asked him, why does the government have the right to force a needle into somebody's arm that doesn't want a shot? And the exact words that came out of Neil deGrasse Tyson's mouth was, it's not about you, it's for the greater good. And so this is a real slippery slope, and conservatives also need to be careful about the pipeline issue, but we're on the right track here. Another thing I get out of this article is the amount of waste and abuse of taxpayer money for some of the stupidest stuff you can ever imagine. And so in the coming weeks and months, when they're talking about the budget and how much the government spends, just remember, the government is the most wasteful, most abusive, most inefficient and ineffective and bloated institution when it comes to money that we have ever seen. And it's getting worse and worse and worse. This is why we're in $33 trillion in debt. We are like 400 times more in debt now than we were just 40, 50 years ago. I mean, $33 trillion, we're reaching numbers that the human brain can't even fathom. And I think that's where the disconnect is coming from. I think the disconnect is coming from the numbers are so big you can't even make sense of it anymore. No family would run their budget like this, to where they would max out their credit cards, and instead of fixing their spending habits, they just ask the credit card company for a budget increase. That's essentially what we're doing every single time one of these budget battles come up. It's just the Democrats want to increase the limit and Republicans want to cut down on spending. We do not have an income issue in this country. We have a spending problem in this country. We bring in plenty. I think it's like $4.5 trillion every year, but we're spending $7 trillion a year. So as a family, as any normal family that manages the budget in their family, manages their expenses and their income and all that good stuff, nobody would sit there and not want to cut back on spending. Nobody handles their finances this way, period. But the government. This is the common sense mentality between being a conservative and a leftist Democrat. They don't have common sense. Their common sense is like, I mean, this is what made Donald Trump's policies so popular and so effective. This is what made his administration so good. It was just common sense. Common sense immigration. Like building a wall, because you have to plug the hole before you can bail out the water, right? Pretty common sense stuff. I mean, this isn't hard stuff. Eminent domain, everybody can see, is going to be a problem in the future. And I actually have experience with this personally. Not personally, but a friend of mine. A friend of mine in Colorado lived pretty far out into the sticks, had a beautiful piece of property out there. And either the state or the government came through and essentially forced my buddy's mom to sell her property. Granted, yes, they gave her, I think, a little bit over what the value was. But the thing is she didn't want to sell it. Her husband died in that house. That was their property. They had horses. It was a ranch. It was a beautiful piece of property. So she went to battle for it. She wanted to keep it. So a few years goes by and she ended up losing. They wanted the property for a railroad track. Yes. And they used eminent domain to acquire her property. They gave her the money, they gave her the value of what her property was, and forced her to move. So this is something that does happen. And having something like this, stealing farmers' land, property, for a CO2 capture pipeline is a canary in the coal mine. It is the inch that they will take a mile from. So we need to be real careful with this. This is definitely a battle that we need to pay attention to. It's no different than if you were allowed Democrats to ban AR-15s. They won't stop until every single gun is banned. Nobody thinks the Democrats are going to stop with just AR-15s. It'll be AR-15s, and then somewhere in the bill, they'll put some type of language or lingo that says any gun that looks scary, and then they'll just say that every gun looks scary. That's how they do it. This is what these people have been doing. This is how the Democrats and the Biden administration operate. They completely subvert Congress. They subvert the rule of law. They subvert the Supreme Court and its rulings. They just do what they think is going to advance their agenda. And this is one of them. But what Vivek is hitting on is actually a bigger conversation as to who is buying up all this land. I think this is a tactic that we need to pay attention to. I think this is a tactic that's being used by the globalists, by the elites, and one of those people is Bill Gates. But before we move on to that, I want to explain to you, can the government actually seize my property without paying me? Because if there's Democrats listening, I want to make sure that I am giving you the truth. This is not a conspiracy theory that tinfoil hat wearing conservatives are pushing to spread fear amongst the people. This is a real thing that can happen. It's called eminent domain. And so here is an article from findlaw.com, and it says, can the government seize my property without paying me? Homeowners have highly protected rights with respect to their property. They generally have the right to defend the land against intruders, build upon the property, and use it for any lawful purpose. However, there are a limited number of circumstances under which the government can take a homeowner's property away, such as under the doctrine of eminent domain. But there are other instances, albeit quite limited, where the government may take somebody's property without paying for it. Yes, so the government can take your property. This is something that I've said for years and years and years, that the government should have never been able to do this, ever. Eminent domain should have never been a thing, ever. I don't care if it's for a highway. I don't care if it's for a railroad. I don't care if it's for anything. The problem is you do run up to the... I just think there's better ways around it, man. Like, it doesn't have to be this way. The problem is you have a government that likes to abuse its power. And once you set precedent and you allow them to do one thing, they'll use it for much more sinister stuff, like CO2 capture pipelines running through essentially wherever they want to go, if this is allowed to pass, if this is allowed to happen. So who are these people buying up this land? And I think it's the rich corporate elites like BlackRock. BlackRock is pissed off. Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, is pissed off that his company's name keeps getting brought up in all these conversations. And, you know, he's just like, why has it got to be BlackRock? He sent out a tweet or he sent out a memo the other day talking about, why does it have to be BlackRock? Why is it my company that's always the topic of all these discussions when it comes to buying property and pushing the CRT BS and this DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion stuff? It's because he is the flag holder. This guy is the number one guy. So of course he's going to get all the pushback. Of course he's going to be in all the articles and in all the conversations. Well, if he wasn't actually pushing all this garbage, this woke garbage like the DEI and CRT and all this stuff, then people wouldn't talk about him. But another one of those people that a lot of people don't really talk about is Bill Gates. Yes, I got an article here from The Guardian. It's a couple years old. The Guardian is way leftist article. Bill Gates is the biggest private owner of farmland in the United States. Why? Gates has been buying land like it's going out of style. He now owns more farmland than my entire Native American nation. Bill Gates has never been a farmer, so why did the Land Report dub him Farmer Bill this year? The third richest man on the planet doesn't have a green thumb, nor does he put in the back-breaking labor humble people do to grow our food and who get far less praise for it. That kind of hard work isn't what made him rich. Gates' achievement, according to the report, that he's the largest private owner of farmland in the U.S., a 2018 purchase of 14,500 acres of prime eastern Washington farmland, which is traditional Yakama territory, for $171 million, helped him get that title. In total, Gates owns approximately 242,000 acres of farmland with assets totaling more than $690 million. To put that in perspective, that's nearly the size of Hong Kong and twice the acreage of the Lower Brule Sioux tribe, where I'm an enrolled member. A white man owns more farmland than my entire native nation. And so the Guardian article was kind of taking it into a different direction, and that's why I read it. Because if it was talking about the subject we're talking about, of course it would spin it to where the theory we're talking about isn't actually true. So they would. This is how the leftist Democrats work. They would just deny Bill Gates being the biggest owner of farmland in the world, the biggest private owner of farmland in the world. These people deny truth just so long as that denial advances their agenda. And so, but because he was talking about why Bill Gates owns more farmland than the Native Americans, then they hate Bill Gates. So if Bill Gates was, behind the persecution of Donald Trump, they would love Bill Gates. See, they have no principles. They have no values. They have no standards. Their principles are malleable. They can change them however they want in order to get a desired outcome. And so, like I said, if Bill Gates would be, if Bill Gates would be the persecutor of Donald Trump or anything Trump, then he would be the greatest man alive. Anyways, this is what I think is happening. These rich elite globalists like Bill Gates, George Soros, Larry Fink, BlackRock, Vanguard, you know the list. Just go down the list. These people are buying up all this land. And it's not just Bill Gates. There's a lot of other rich, elite, World Economic Forum toting people buying up private land, farmland, because they want to be able to control it. And don't get it twisted. If the United States government were to go to Bill Gates and say, hey, we need to use some of your acreage to build an illegal alien campground, or we need to build a facility for an illegal immigration, an illegal immigration center, he would probably sell it to the government. I think it's very dangerous that these rich elites are buying up all this land. When you're talking about somebody that has almost $1 billion worth of private property, that's a lot of land, 242,000 acres. And this was 2 years ago. I'm sure he's acquired more since. This is a big problem to me. You essentially have rich globalist elites running everything here behind the background, behind the scenes. And most people don't even realize it. They control our politicians. They control the deep state. They control the Washington swamp. They are the donors. They are the K Street. They are the Alpha and the Omega. They are becoming so rich and powerful. They are trying to control every aspect of our life. And it's not, listen, Elon Musk kind of spilled the beans the other night when he was on that interview where he essentially told everyone to go F themselves. When he said he's so tired of people talking about doing good things while doing evil. And he's talking about these rich elites. People like Elon Musk and Donald Trump, they don't want to be the card carriers for the rich globalist elites. They don't want that lifestyle. They never were. And this is why the elites are after these people all the time. This is why Elon Musk, people like Elon Musk and Donald Trump, they have huge targets on their back by the Washington establishment. Why? Because the Washington establishment is run by the globalist elites. There's no bigger threat to the World Economic Forum than Donald Trump, because Donald Trump has already said on day one, he's going to be pulling us out of that BS. There's no bigger threat to the Washington establishment than Elon Musk, because he owns Twitter. He owns the largest social media platform in the country, in the world. And so these people are threats because they don't carry the card. Now, if Elon Musk would have been anything like Jack Dorsey and essentially censored anything the Washington establishment wanted, then he would be a card carrier. He would be invited to the club. He would be a part of the club. Same thing with Donald Trump. If Donald Trump were to come in and run Washington exactly like Washington's been being run by these politicians for decades, he would be part of the club. And we would essentially be stuck inside this matrix that we've been in for decades and decades. That's what I feel like we're in. It's like we're in the matrix. And in the last 8 years, people have really started to unplug themselves from this illusion, this society. And a lot of people have been forced to unplug themselves because things are just getting so bad. Because the globalist elites and the Washington, D.C. swamp and its symbiotic relationship with the media have brought this country to the depths of hell like we've never been before. This country's in $33 trillion in debt, and people are like, well, I've been paying my taxes this whole time. You take almost a third of my paycheck every single pay period. So how are we in $33 trillion in debt? Well, people are starting to ask these questions, and the globalist rich elites don't like it. And they see the Great Awakening. And so I think this is why they're forcing the Overton window at such a drastic pace. They're forcing it to try and normalize things that aren't normal, like persecuting a former president, weaponizing the justice system against your political opponents, using the intel agencies to spy on campaigns and try and overthrow a duly elected president, using laws like eminent domain to capture private land from landowners for a CO2 capture pipeline. These things that just aren't normal are starting to become rather normal here in the last 8 years. This is why people are pulling their hair out. Like, what is going on? This is crazy. Well, I'm talking about the people that actually pay attention. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that don't pay attention to what's going on, and so therefore, this is why I think the anti-establishment portion of our population are really, I don't know if they're the majority or the minority yet. I don't know if there's more of us than there is more of them. And when I say them, I'm meaning the globalist elites and all the people still plugged up to the matrix that think everything is fine, that when Joe Biden and his press secretary come out and tell them that the economy's the best economy we've seen in decades, they believe it. These are the people that don't really pay attention. They don't really notice the gas prices. They don't really notice the grocery prices, or they'll notice it, but they don't know where to put the blame. They just think it's all part of the plan. It's almost like it's weird. You remember that there actually is a pretty big correlation between what we're going through right now and the movie The Matrix. When he's sitting down and he's looking at all those numbers, the green numbers flying on the screen, and it doesn't make sense. And he sits there and he says, once you stare at it for a while, you kind of get you could see what's going on. So he's like, you could see this here, and then you could see this here, but to Neo, it just looks like a bunch of numbers. Well, what we're seeing right now is the enlightened people are starting to become woke in a way where we are the awoken ones, I guess you could say, because we're starting to see the plan. We're starting to see their mission. And their mission is to have control over everything. Just like the World Economic Forum said, you will own nothing and be happy. Essentially turn us all into modern day slaves. Really? I mean, think about it. It kind of feels like that now, does it not? I mean, you get your paychecks, you pay your bills. I mean, everybody's just kind of in this paycheck to paycheck mode, just doing enough to get by. It's like we're stuck in a rut. It's like they have complete control over everything. And then you look at things, you look at situations like this where the government can use this law called eminent domain and steal your property. Well, that must mean that you really don't own your property, do you? Do we really ever own anything? Think about it. Do you own your house if you don't pay taxes on it? Do you really actually own anything? I don't think so. Do you actually ever own your land? Apparently not, according to eminent domain. So Vivik's right on point here, and, so I wanted to bring this point up to you. I don't think a lot of people are going to be talking about it, but this was something that kind of popped out to me. It popped off the screen to me because it is, I think, an important story. I think it is the canary in the coal mine when it comes to the government and its capture of private property for its own projects, for its own agenda. Like, maybe these farmers don't want to give up their land for a CO2 carbon capture pipeline. You know what I mean? Not only is it dangerous, obviously you have, 200 people that were hospitalized and killed 45 others. But it's like, it shouldn't be up to the government whether, like, I don't know. It's just like the American people no longer have control of what their government's doing anymore. Like the needs for the people and what the government's actually doing. There's no overlap with anything anymore. And so you sit here and you say, well, they're spending, $80 billion. They're sending it over to Ukraine to prop up their infrastructure and pay their politicians pensions and prop up their fire department and their police and their roads and bridges. And then we're watching our country and our bridges and our roads just fall apart and just disintegrate. And we're looking around like, hey, where's all this money going? I do have to say, I live in a community, not a community, but I live in a district where I actually see my tax dollars at work. And it's great. So down the street, there was a park that they just built. a nice brand new park. And the park before was great. I mean, it was okay. But they built a brand new park. The kids love it. The whole community loves it. It was very planned. It was very well planned out. And that's our tax dollars. The roads are pretty decent. They're not perfect, but listen, I had 2 huge potholes in front of my house, huge potholes. And every time somebody would drive in one of those potholes and it had water in it, it would splash it all over the car, gravel, everything. And I went out there, and the state or the city has a app to where you can take a picture and send it to them, and you tell them what it is, potholes, you take a picture, you send it to them. They were out the next day, and those potholes were filled. And you're constantly seeing, the Christmas lights that they're adding all over this time of year for Christmas. Like, I like to see my tax dollars going to work. I actually don't even mind paying taxes when I can actually see it going to where it needs to go. When I see a new boat ramp being built, when I see a new park being built, when I see all these things, these nice things that we're given with our tax money, the schools, the police force, driving, decent cars, I don't mind paying taxes. But when you have a government that is not only not spending your money on things that we want or even things that we need, like roads and bridges, infrastructure, stuff like that, but they're sending money to other countries to make their countries better. And not only that, but they're doing it with money that they don't even have. And they're putting us in debt to do it. So we're $33 trillion in debt. And so, starting the show out, Vivek really, I like Vivek because he's saying the truth. He's saying stuff that these other candidates just won't say. And that is because these other candidates are bought and paid for. Yes, including Ron DeSantis. You can tell that Ron DeSantis on his campaign is not the Ron DeSantis that is the governor of Florida. It's somebody totally different because he is being programmed like a robot, like a pull string toy by the big donors and special interests. And guess what? When Ron DeSantis, if he were to become president, he would have to return the favor to those donors and special interests. Because if there's one thing that my mom taught me, is nothing is free. Nothing. So they would want favors in return. And so this is why it's such a big problem for candidates to be bought and paid for. And I appreciate Vivek calling him out. And, is Vivek fully trustworthy yet? Nah, not really in my book. There's just something about him. Somebody commented on my last video talking about how they don't really trust him either. There's just something about him. And I have to agree. I don't know what it is yet, but it's just I don't know. I just got a gut feeling, man. And usually my intuition is pretty accurate. So I'm going to just stick with it. Got to stick with my gut feeling, man. And I just don't know. But the thing is somebody else commented on my video saying, even if Vivek doesn't do anything, if he doesn't become president or vice president, just him on that stage speaking the truth to the whole country is a blessing. So people, your establishment rhino Republicans, people that hate Donald Trump, people, like I said, that are still attached to the Matrix, they're watching the debates and they're watching and they're listening to Vivek say these things. And so it has to get them thinking. Like, wait a minute, I didn't know the government was, trying to steal people's property for a pipeline. I didn't know that there was a congressperson that said there was 200 federal agents, undercover agents at the January 6th protest that day. So Vivek's saying all these things. And so even if he does nothing, at least he's getting the truth out there to those, I guess, to the hypnotized observers. At least he's getting the truth out there. So that's what I wanted to talk about. This show went on a little bit longer than I wanted, but I think it's important for you to know these things. We're gonna pay attention to this topic in the eminent domain and what's going on in Iowa. And when more details are released, I'll definitely be sure to let you know and fill you in with those. This is probably going to have to go to the Supreme Court without a doubt. I think it is. And the Supreme Court's going to have to get busy here in the next 12 months because they are going to have some cases on their desk that are going to determine the future of this country. A lot of them have to do with freedom of speech. A lot of them have to do with intimate domain. A lot of them are going to have to do with with Donald Trump and a lot of it. So the Supreme Court's going to have to really step up But again, as conservatives, we never like to give anybody too much trust. So let's just pray and hope that these judges, the Supreme Court judges, let's just pray that God gives them the strength. There was a prayer that I always used to say when I was younger. I'm not really sure what prayer it is, but I used to say it all the time, and my parents used to say it all the time at the dinner table. And it's a prayer that I learned growing up, and it says, "Lord, grant me the strength to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference." And just like I've been telling people on this show, that following in Jesus' footsteps, following in the Lord's path, gives you ultimate wisdom. Not only does it give you wisdom, but I am a firm believer that Christ and religion and believing in God is the key to long-lasting happiness. And just like I always say in my other shows, that the more religion is removed from society, the worse things get. And so when I was thinking about, my gut feeling and intuition, I thought about that prayer and it just kind of popped up into my head. It's a great prayer if you really think about the words. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you for tuning in. Make sure to tune into the next segment. I will be releasing around the same time tomorrow. I want you guys to have a great day. I hope you had a great weekend. And make sure you tune into the next segment. If you guys want to get a hold of me, it's StephenTaurielloShow@gmail.com. And if you could, please, I would appreciate it. Follow the show on all social media platforms. You can follow me on X at Stephen Tauriello. You can follow me at Facebook, The Stephen Tauriello Show. You know how to get a hold of me by email. And most of all, if you could, I'd really appreciate it if you followed me on Rumble. I am trying to upload 100% to Rumble. I still upload to YouTube, so if you want to follow me there, go ahead. But I want to support Rumble as much as possible. And also follow me on X. I'm trying to support X as much as possible too. We have to support these platforms that are fighting for free speech. And Elon Musk at X and Rumble, they are those people. So we need to make sure we support them as much as possible. So if you could, follow me at X at Stephen Tauriello, and also follow the show on Rumble. And it is called The Stephen Tauriello Show. Just type in my name, Stephen Tauriello. It should pop up. I upload every single episode to Rumble. So yeah, if you could, follow the show there. And again, I want you guys to have a good day. I hope you had a great weekend. I want you guys to have a great week. God bless you, and God bless America. You guys have a good day. Bye-bye.